this country is at war with Germany.
We had to do a job, and we did the job, and that was it.
The men had to go and fight, and the women had to take their place.
Soldiers, sailors, and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force, you are about to embark upon the Great Crusade.
Hello and welcome back to Foxhole Chat for some more War Waffle. This week we're talking about the preparation for D-Day, as hopefully when this episode goes out it will be D-Day week, all being well, and a lot went into the planning of D-Day.
It did.
Let us tell you that. There was a lot.
Yeah. Forget you planning a wedding, D-Day. Oh,
yeah. So the first thing I found was Operation Rankin, which happened, came into force-ish on February 1944. So it was basically a 3-part contingency plan if the war suddenly changed before D-Day could happen. So it was split into A, B and C. A being the depleted German forces, if they lost morale, they just weren't interested anymore. They were down in tools and stuff, and the Allies could almost plough their way through them. B was the withdrawal of German forces, mainly from either Norway or France. And then C was a German surrender, or basically it collapsing within a bit of a mutiny. So they were developed as basically these would be triggered if one of those scenarios happened. So one of them, at least, the 101st Airborne was on standby. They would then go in and take the port at Le Havre and then the surrounding area, so we could get troops onto foreign soils and they could then do what they needed to do. But because the Germans, their morale was still relatively high, they didn't back away and they didn't surrender. D-Day inevitably happened.
I mean, that's wishful thinking. It's wishful thinking, but I suppose you've got to have every contingency planned for, rather than be very stubborn and, we're going to do this no matter what. Because if you could, if they were set on Normandy, but then an opportunity arose where they could go into, like you say, Le Havre, then why not? Why would you continue to go, to Cherbourg and Normandy and that region, rather than pivot? So that makes total sense.
Also found Operation Mush. I love who names these.
What a name.
I don't know who names these, but yes, Operation Mush was basically the British airborne dress rehearsal for D-Day. So it was a 3-day exercise from the 20th. No, it wasn't. That's more than 3 days. From the April 21st to the 26th in 1944. It was in the Gloucestershire, Oxfordshire, Wiltshire area. So it was a full-scale rehearsal, mainly for the 6th Airborne's role on D-Day. So the exercise involved around 700 aircraft with gliders to simulate the full airborne assault. So the gliders landed on captured fields while paratroopers secured the area. It involved the British 1st Airborne, the 6th Airborne Division and the Polish 1st Parachute Brigade. It was a top secret, come back to that, it was a top secret dress rehearsal for Operation Tonga, which was the 6th Airborne's D-Day mission to secure the eastern flank of Normandy, so Caen, capture bridges and destroy the Merville gun battery. How can it be top secret when you've got 700 aircraft and gliders flying down literally the middle of England and not draw attention to yourselves?
As soon as you said it, that's exactly what I had in my head. I was like, you've got to remember as I'll put this into context. Like I might have said this before, but people haven't seen this sort of thing before. So if you're just, an everyday person going about your life in Gloucestershire, Oxfordshire, wherever, Wiltshire, and you see 700 gliders, you're going to think, what is going on? Is this the second coming? Is this the Germans? Because you don't know, because if you're not military, you don't know the difference between at this point between what a British glider looks like or a German one, especially if you don't have field glasses or binoculars or a telescope and you can't see the markings. You might think that it is a German invasion. You go back to the Battle of Britain, and farmers would think RAF parachuting down. They thought that they were paratroopers, and that would kind of spread through the village. Oh, there's a German paratrooper. Turns out no, it was just an RAF pilot. So then, yeah, exactly. How could it be top top secret? Yeah. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, Gloucestershire, Oxfordshire, and Wiltshire is like smack bang in the middle of the country ish. So
Yeah.
for those that don't know England geography, if you get a picture of England, find London, and then basically go left.
Yeah.
If you get wet and you're in the sea, you've gone too far.
Yeah.
It's like it's that bit,
Yeah,
that
it
bit
is.
in the middle,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
like sort of
yeah.
like down a bit.
Mm,
So it's like apart from the Midlands,
mm.
it's like smack bang in the middle of the country.
Yeah, yeah.
But hey, it must have worked because they did their job on D-Day.
Exactly, exactly. I have a question though, because obviously, like, British Airborne's objective was to capture bridges. So were there bridges used in this operation, or was it just kind of fields and just practicing with gliders and that sort of thing?
I'm not sure, to be
Hmm.
honest. I couldn't find a great amount on it.
Hmm. Because I'm just thinking like that kind of area that we're talking about, Gloucestershire, Oxfordshire.
Hmm.
I don't know how many big big bridges there are.
I wouldn't have thought many because it's smack
No,
bang in the middle of land, so there wouldn't have been any great um, bits of water
yeah,
to have a big
exactly.
bridge.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Um,
You think of Pegasus Bridge and it's quite, well, it's bigger than some of the bridges you
hmm,
would see in these small villages that we have
yeah,
in England. So yeah, maybe it was just more of getting used to glider and airborne troops working together, which makes sense. Makes sense.
yeah. I mean, they might well have had like little Bailey bridges over like the local canals and
Mm,
stuff, but yeah, there wouldn't have been any big bridges
no.
in that part of the country, I'd have thought.
Mm.
Uh, Another D-Day prep was Exercise Tiger, which we have discussed on previous episodes. So if you've not listened to that, why not? Go listen to that. Pause this, go listen to that. You'll know
Yeah,
what we're on about, and then come back to this one, and then we'll carry on with D-Day.
yeah, and it'll all make sense because it all ties in.
Yeah, but long story short, that was the American, mainly sea naval part of the D-Day dress rehearsal, and it went a bit wrong, to say the least.
Indeed.
Well, the 31st of May, 1944, the embarkation started. So that's when mainly soldiers, so the airmen would have been at their airfields waiting. So all the soldiers that would have been storming the beaches and the naval crews would begin to congregate on the south coast before boarding their ships. So the scale of that operation meant the embarkation took 5 days
Yep.
to get all the equipment on first, with the troops loading shortly before.
Mm.
5 days. That
I
just gives
mean,
you like the scale of it.
oh yeah. I mean, to put it into context, people. So it took 5 days because there was 39 divisions, and these were all based in the south of England. Of these, 20 divisions were US troops, 14 divisions were British, three Canadian, one French, and one Polish. Now, I wish I Googled how big a division is, but if you think, God, so think Band of Brothers, 506 Parachute Infantry Regiment, and then that's the regiment, and then the division is above that. So we're talking,
So you're talking like Able Company, Fox Company, Easy Company,
yeah,
Dog, like
yeah,
all of yeah.
yeah. So those are like your regiment, and then divisions are absolutely massive. So, and to get all those people, well, A, to get them in the right place at the right time, on time as well. No wonder it took 5 days. And actually a bit before that, but before the embarkation, obviously, we're saying about the the airborne part of it being top secret. Obviously, D-Day needed to be really, really strict. So it was actually way back in March, on the 10th of March, 1944, strict controls were brought in to limit movement. So mail and other communications through and from the south of England. So obviously, people writing letters, Dear John letters, that will have been even stricter. And it didn't just restrict soldiers from all leave was cancelled from the 6th of April. And civilians also found their movement severely limited as well, because you got to think, like we're saying, 39 divisions worth of men trying to move through the south of England. And if you've ever been to the south of England, the roads aren't exactly big. So, and even in 1940s times when the cars were tiny and there wasn't very many of them and the population was smaller, that amount of people, is going to have an impact. So no wonder, even civilians were affected. And there's a really great picture. I think I posted it on our Instagram before, possibly. Um, and it's sort of a picture where it's kind of like a street. I think it's in Southampton, and there's a lady putting her washing out, but then in the background there's military vehicles, and you think the duality of that, of just someone trying to go about their daily life. And I think there's an old man as well with his hands on his hips, which I'm like, that would be me. You just stood there like, what's going on here? Who's in my street? Bloody Yanks. That was said a few times.
Yeah.
That was said a few times.
Well, it's the same. There was it over here, overpaid and oversexed or sexed or something.
Yes, yeah. And then what the Americans used to say, we're underpaid, undersexed, and under Eisenhower.
Yeah.
That was the reverse. Yes.
Yeah.
And actually, that ties in quite well actually to another fun fact. So if you cast your mind back, we'll go a bit further back now. So obviously, there's all these troops in Britain, but it was actually in January 1942 that the first US troops arrived in England, and this was obviously way before D-Day. Good few years, and this was kind of in preparation for the invasion of North Africa, and so way back when the Americans were given a publication titled Instructions for American Servicemen in Britain. And you might have heard of this before. It's a little booklet, because you've got to think this time travel wasn't as free as it is now. Obviously the jet aircraft hadn't been invented yet. So to get across the Atlantic, you had to go on a ship, and only the rich could afford that. So this was a way to kind of educate the Americans on British culture. And in it, there was some really funny things that I read. So servicemen were told to never insult the monarchy, and never say and never say that the British don't know how to make a good cup of coffee, but you don't know how to make a good cup of tea. And yeah, it makes sense why they did this, because this will have been a massive cultural shock to us here and the Americans as well. And I'm sure there was many funny stories that happened in sleepy villages in England in the build up to D-Day.
Yeah, but you have to remember as well, Britain was at war 3 years before the Americans came over.
Yeah.
So that booklet you're on about, I've got a copy, and there's a bit in it about the British warm beer.
Yes. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Can't have a warm pint. That's just just wrong on so many levels.
Yeah.
So with an operation as big as D-Day, as we've said before, the weather will get a vote. So Eisenhower and his little crew at Southwark House needed a weatherman, and he called upon Captain James Stagg, who will play a key feature in the new Pressure movie, which is out in September over here in England. But basically, a storm was coming, which would have put a stop to air support and parachute drops. And then challenging sea conditions. I mean, troops were already seasick on calmer conditions, so you would have had boats capsizing and crashing into each other and God knows what if they'd went during a storm. To the point where on the 5th of June, Eisenhower described the weather as wind of almost hurricane proportions. So they definitely made the right decision in putting it back 24 hours.
Yeah, I think this bit of D-Day is often overlooked, and I'm sure when people heard about they're making a World War II film about weather, how can they make weather interesting? But you've got to remember it played and still to this day plays a massive role in anything. Like you say, if they were to say, right, regardless of the weather, we're going to go, but let's just go with the seaborne element. You don't have any parachute drops. It probably would have failed. I'm pretty confident in saying it probably would have failed because you don't have the British capturing the bridges over the rivers, so you don't have the eastern flank secured. You don't have the American, 101st and 82nd, them kind of capturing strategic points, places like Carentan. You don't have that, so there's a high chance that we would have been pushed back into the sea because they were stubborn and they just decided, no, we know best. So I think it's going to be a really interesting film to watch, and it's a really interesting part of the history of D-Day, because it's a big like what if moment, and to go before, or if it was delayed even further than the 6th of June, what would have happened, So I think it's, even if it is weather, it's still a very, very interesting part of the story.
So that's a bit of preparation that was done in England, but preparation was also happening in France itself. So the French resistance, the SOE, the Special Operatives Executive, and the OSS, which is the American version, the Office of Strategic Services, were all playing their part as well. So there was a poem by Paul Verlaine, broadcast by the BBC, which acted as a coded message to the French resistance, ordering them to conduct specific acts of sabotage. So on the 1st of June, the long sobs of the violins of autumn was broadcast. It notified the resistance that Operation Overlord would occur within 2 weeks. Wound My Heart, with a monumentous languor, was broadcast. It signalled that the invasion was imminent, so within 48 hours. And they commenced the sabotage of operations, basically railroads. They were put across as personal messages, so it's not to draw attention to itself. The German intelligence intercepted these messages and understood their meaning. They were not immediately acted upon because of numerous false alarms and the lack of coordination. They knew it was coming.
No, I don't believe that for a second. I don't believe that for a second. Because if you think, just stop and think for a minute. The whole reason, the Americans had the code words flash and thunder is because the Germans couldn't say flash and thunder because they could tell the difference. So you're telling me the Germans could understand a poem and go, yep, that word means that they're going to attack this. I don't believe that. I think that's again the Germans being overconfident, and I believe the it not being acted on because of the disjointed command structure and the just laying on their laurels sort of thing. But no, they didn't have a clue. Nah.
That is depicted in the film The Longest Day as well.
Right, I've never seen that film.
The reading of the poem and everything.
Okay.
But there's 4 stages of sabotage for the resistance. They started with the railways, so that would hinder troop movements and the supply chain and all of that jazz. Mm-hmm. They then cut the power. So while troops were slowly fixing the damaged railways, to make life more difficult, they attacked the electrical facilities, so there was no power to the German positions in that surrounding area. To then keep delaying them, They engaged with the Germans to delay them reaching the Allies. And then they also cut the communications. So by this point, the Allies had cracked the German codes with the Enigma machine. So the Allies wanted to hear everything that was going on. So that meant forcing the Germans to use open channels, like the radio rather than telephone lines. So the resistance just went around cutting telephone lines.
Yeah, you would.
Yeah. Resistance also helped gather intelligence beforehand. So they would take pictures, draw maps, and send it all back to London of like German positions and bunkers and where like the garrisons are based and which units where and stuff. So they knew what they were up against when they got here.
Yeah, I think sometimes this element can be a bit overlooked because I think we get caught up in the more militaristic side, which I'm guilty of. Everybody loves reading about troop. Well, not everybody. Maybe it's just me who likes reading about troop movements and what troops were here and that sort of thing. But it was a very, very crucial part of the D-Day mission. Operation Overlord, and I think for the French it would have been. You got to think they've been invaded for a number of years now. So for them to be able to do something to contribute, that would have helped their morale enormously. To feel like they were part of it.
Yeah. So another way, the Allies prepped. They created the Ghost Army. So that was literally inflatable tanks and multimedia. So they'd play sounds of troop movements over loudspeakers, basically giving the effect that we had more men and more armor than we actually did. So that was split into. So that was Operation Bodyguard overall. And they convinced the Germans that the attack would come into Norway. There was Operation Fortitude South, which was making the Germans think the invasion would be in Pas-de-Calais. Yeah, sorry, north was Norway, south was Calais. So yeah, I want an inflatable tank.
Yeah,
that sounds awesome.
Watching the footage is so cool because you see the men, they're literally just pushing them over, and I think there's one of them like takes the turret off the Sherman tank, doesn't he? And it's that footage always blows my mind because, again, put it in context, this is 1940 and they've invented inflatable vehicles and tanks, and it's not just like white canvas, like they're painted to look like the actual thing. The trucks have windscreen wipers painted on them, and the tanks have the markings on. It's incredible, and again, just a small part of something little that really, really helped ensure the success of D-Day.
The civilians also played their part throughout the war years in the planning for D-Day. So there was a covert intelligence campaign asking the British public to send in holiday postcards and photographs from European coastlines. The BBC issued an appeal for and received nearly 10 million items from the public.
Wow.
They were helped to plan the D-Day landings because they wanted detailed intel on German defences. So, if you've got a picture of a nice open field, chances are there'll be something in that big open field. Exactly. Yeah, they sent in postcards, holiday photos, diaries.
Exactly.
The whole works.
Yeah. And I think that was probably good for like a comparison, right? Because if someone's got a picture of the coast from before the war, obviously, and then they can see how the Germans have built it up, and kind of get a timeline of, okay, that house is probably still there and that seawall is probably still there. So maybe we could, if we make an opening through that bit, we can advance through there. That sort of thing will have been a big part. And as well, like looking at more the bigger picture, and something that obviously, if you've listened before, I love the RAF, and in the lead up to D-Day, we had something known as Big Week, which, if you don't know, that was basically the air element of the lead up to D-Day, and there was a bit of a back and forth of what should Big Week be targeting. Should it be rail and transport, or should it be oil and production? To kind of cripple the German production line or stop troop movements. And it was finally settled that it would be a mixture of both. So it's kind of the RAF at night were targeting the rail networks, and the US AAF during the day they were targeting the oil plants like kind of further into Europe. But again, this is all done to aid D-Day and the preparation, because if the D-Day invasion was just to happen, the seaborne element and the paratrooper drops without this kind of pre-bombardment in the week leading up to D-Day, as well as destroying the Luftwaffe, I think it would have been very, very different. So I think Big Week, it did what it says in the tin, and it was a big week and a crucial week. And I do have James Holland's book to read, which I can't wait to dive into. But yes, can't forget about the RAF and the Airmen and what they did on D-Day. Because I think a lot of the time it gets D-Day and the build-up is all about like ground troops, isn't it? I think that's what I've certainly come to learn when reading about the subject.
Well, D-Day didn't almost happen because of a crossword. So on May the 2nd, a British intelligence officer was doing the Daily Telegraph crossword puzzle, and number 7 across, the answer was Utah. Ordinarily, you'd have just gone straight past that and say, yeah, fine.
Yeah.
But this was a month before D-Day. And as we know, Utah is a code name for one of the American landing beaches. So it's not the first time something like this has happened. So apparently 2 years earlier, the same newspaper dropped a crossword puzzle, French port, and the answer was Dieppe. Which was the location of the Allied raid scheduled for literally the following day. So MI5 ruled that out as a coincidence, but now here it is again.
Yeah.
So a quick scan of the crossword, code words of Juno, gold, and sword all appeared as well.
No.
And then 2 weeks before D-Day, there was Omaha, Overlord, Mulberry, and Neptune.
Wow. Right, that's it. The Telegraph. Everybody stop buying the Telegraph. Put them out of business. They almost cost us the free world. That's it. No more.
So the headmaster at Strand School in Effingham, Surrey, 2 MI5 agents literally stormed into the school, located the headmaster, gripped him by the arms, and then walked him briskly to a waiting car. He was later released because D-Day was successful, so I'm presuming if D-Day wasn't successful, he wouldn't have been released. No. He might have been leaving in a wooden box.
Or he would have been, how can I put this politically, persuaded to possibly disclose some information. Did he know anything? And was he a German spy? That sort of thing. But I think, that's too much of a coincidence. For it to be a coincidence, right?
You'd have thought so, but how would a headmaster in Surrey potentially know these things? We'll never know. I don't think we'll ever know. Never know.
We'll never know.
So some of the prep before D-Day was as a result of the failure of the Dieppe raid. So we needed some inventions to help us get through D-Day. One of them was Pluto. And no, not the cute fluffy dog from Disney. It was the pipeline under the ocean. So basically the pipeline pumped fuel across 2 secret routes. The first was codenamed Bambi. That went from the Isle of Wight to Cherbourg, a distance of 70 miles. And the second was codenamed Dumbo. So there is still a Disney theme there.
Yeah, there is.
And that went from Kent to Boulogne in France, so a distance of 30 miles. So Pluto was pumping oil and fuel. So once everybody had made it on land and further inland, they would need supplies to get all the way to Berlin. And Pluto was one of the ways in which they did that.
It was. And I think this shows that the Allies, they already knew even before D-Day how the supply chain was going to help them win the war. They couldn't just, oh, it's fine, we'll land in France and then we'll just push them back and we'll march on into Germany. You know, they knew, unlike the Germans, that they couldn't get too far ahead of themselves. They knew they had to have systems in place set up behind them so that if the initial landing was successful, that success could carry on rather than just go, oh, yeah, it's fine, you know, we'll go, you know, like the Germans did. So yes, Pluto was another bit of a sci-fi invention that came from the 1940s.
Another invention was the Mulberry Harbour. So these were floating artificial harbours designed and constructed by British military engineers, and they were literally towed across the channel. They were used to protect supply ships anchored off the coast of Normandy. The supply ships needed to sit in deep water, so therefore couldn't come in close to the shore, so they needed a harbour. And there's not too many harbours in Normandy. You've got Cherbourg right down the other end. You've got Le Havre the other way, I think.
Yeah. So Cherbourg's at the top, and then Le Havre is kind of over here, sort of thing.
And there's Ouistreham.
Yes.
Yeah, it's Ouistreham as well. But they're either all the way over there or all the way over there, and not a lot in between. So they built two, Mulberry A and Mulberry B. So Mulberry A was constructed off Omaha Beach to supply US forces, and Mulberry B was on Gold Beach in Arromanches to supply British and Canadians. Mulberry A was destroyed in a storm a few days after it was built and couldn't be saved. Mulberry B was also damaged, but could be saved, and then that was operational for 10 months after the landing. So that would have put you to the end of the war, wouldn't it? 10 months after the landing.
Yeah.
6 months to Christmas, and then that would have been pretty much the end of the war.
Yeah, roughly. I mean, it was a lot of, obviously, men and material went through there at the beginning of the war, and then as they kind of moved further into Europe and into the Netherlands, obviously more ports opened up, so the supplies were kind of, distributed, further along where the Allies were. But yeah, it's an amazing feat. There's somebody had the idea. Oh, I know what we'll do. We'll make a harbour the size of Dover by making these concrete caissons and floating them across the channel. And with the Mulberries, there was actually 423 ships on the construction crew side of things. So like we're saying, once the initial landings had taken place, infrastructure had to be put in place to support the supply and the invasion. So you got 423 tugs and other ships carried out the construction work. So some obviously were responsible for floating across the Mulberry Harbours and putting them in place. And I think as well, there was a number of ships that were sunk off the coast of Normandy to kind of to form a bit of a breakwater to help them construct the Mulberry, and they will still be there to this day as is part of the Mulberry Harbours. If you're very lucky to go to Normandy and you go to Arromanches, you can see part of them, which is amazing. And yes, over time they will completely disappear. So I would urge anyone, if you want to go see them sooner rather than later.
Yep, that's all I've got. You got much more?
Let me see. Well, if we dive into some more of the numbers, so if you think the channel, obviously before D-Day was mined by both sides, by us and the Germans, and there's actually 287 minesweepers that were involved in the lead up to D-Day, and obviously they were needed to clear the lanes. They didn't clear the entire channel; it was just to clear the lanes that they knew that they were gonna use for the invasion. And as well, if you think, we often think of like Royal Navy and being the naval part of it and military, but actually what I found was 1,260 merchant ships were used as well. So this was the civilian force tasked with transporting supplies for the army once it landed. And I think that's a bit that kind of gets overlooked. A lot of times you hear, oh, my grandfather was in the merchant navy, and I think for people like me and you, we think, well, what is the merchant navy? It's not the real navy, but I think it was still an important part because you've got to think if all of these military people are involved in this, there needs to be something else to help support them, and that part sometimes gets overlooked. And then just going back to another number that uh, boggled my mind. Again, my love of aircraft. That roughly 10,000 aircraft took place in the lead up to D-Day and D-Day itself. So this was a mix of transport aircraft, the C-47s, the bombers, and the fighters. Mustangs, Spitfires, P-47s, and that's some of the numbers are insane. And I think the biggest one that I think would be a fitting end to the episode was that overall, this is military, civilian, people in the background. 6 million people were involved in the invasion from the Allied side. So, like I said, that's troops, that's airmen, that's people in map rooms and, doing intelligence work and that sort of thing. That is an insane amount of people. And, I know I always say sometimes, I know not everyone would have got on, there would have been arguments, but to get 6 million people on the same cause and all for the same thing, I think that's pretty amazing in my book. And it obviously led to, in my eyes, the greatest military operation in history, I think.
Yeah, agreed. That's a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Cool. That's all from me. Anything to add from you?
No, I think we've covered D-Day. Well, the build up to D-Day really well though.
Yep. So thank you for listening. If you're listening in Normandy, because when this comes out, it should be the week of D-Day. So totally not jealous if you're listening to this in Normandy.
Yep.
If you are, have a nice time. If not, join the club. So thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on Instagram, do all of that good stuff. And we'll see you again next week for some more War Waffle.